Hey Roar Nation, we are back for episode 59.
Welcome to Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You, the podcast that focuses on Christians that are active in everyday life. Join in as we speak to everyone from successful business owners to educators to athletes about their faith and how it helps them reach out and revolutionize those around them to do the same. And now, get ready to roar with your host, the voice of manifestation, John Fuller.
Hey Roar Nation, thank you so much for joining us. We are doing a recap and also number 2. This is, we are furthering from last week. What we talked about is finding purpose, how to deal with pain, and discovering who you are. So I want to thank you guys. If you did not listen to last week's episode, you definitely want to listen to that one first before you jump into this one, because we're basically just extending our conversation with Rusty. Before we get started real quick, I just want to say thank you for those of you who take the time to get on iTunes and you rate and review us. It helps us with our reviews and puts us up on the top. This week, currently, we're number 2 under religion and spirituality because of you guys. Just want to say thank you. And I want to say a shout out to N Howard 95. So that is who left a review. And I just want to read that review real quick. It says, "Dude, I absolutely love listening to your podcast. It's so cool how excited you are to interview all these people and how you can tell it's your true calling because you do such an amazing job at it and you seem so comfortable just in your environment." Hey man, thank you so much for saying that. Thank you so much for all your helpful information you've provided through all the people you've just sat down and communicated with. I've learned so much and continue to just keep learning from all kinds of just amazing people like you and everyone on your show. Thank you so much for all that you do for me and everyone who tunes in. Hey, whoever you are, Howard, I want to say absolutely you're welcome. And the thing that makes my show easy, guys, I do get a lot of people who write or send an email and say those things, those acclimates. Sometimes I stir up on words, man, sorry. But people just give me compliments. But I want to say this. One, it is because I'm walking out what I feel is my gift and my purpose, but mostly it's because of 90% of it is the guests that come on my show because they are awesome, and I'm so privileged to bring them on because they are what make the show amazing. So I want to say thank you to all the people that have come on my show. All right, Rusty, brother, you ready for round 2, my friend?
Yeah, man.
This is why the show is great, is because of people like Rusty. So just want to give a shout out. Okay.
You're too kind, too kind.
So last week, we talked a lot about purpose. We talked about pain. People need to check that out, how that deals with who we are, what we're coming into, Migs Briars, Big 5, taking tests. We are going to dive into questions. We did one question last week by Michael McGeevy, but we are going to answer questions right now. So are you ready?
Let's go.
Okay. So I'm going to ask, the first one was by Becky Dietz. She said, how do you go from purpose to practically living it out? For example, if I am a relationship builder, what does that look like? So it sounds like to me she took a, I just forgot the name of that book because it talks about a relationship builder. That was one of mine. What book is that? I just forgot it. You mentioned it last week.
Enneagram or Myers-Briggs? Strength Finder?
Strength Finder, thank you. That was a Strength Finder. Yeah, that's one of the from Strength Finder. Okay, so she figured out one of her strengths is relationship building. How does that cross with living out purpose in your life?
All right, so Becky, being a relationship builder, it's valuable to know that. And so between action and analysis, it's important to understand both in the long-term pattern of how that works out in your life. You can probably see evidence much in the same way you drop a pebble in a pond. You can see the ripple effects, the shadows, the ripples in your life. And then there's the other aspect of you shouldn't just sit there and think about it. You should act upon it and live it out, because your purpose doesn't lie in just surface level understanding of yourself. You have to go deep. So the Strength Finders test, if you took that and you know your top 5, what that's going to give you is the circle of skills, what your talents are naturally that are imbued within you to develop. That's only one component of finding your purpose. There's the others are understanding your passions, what you love to do, understanding what opportunities are in front of you. And that could be things from like involving culture, this economy, the country you're born into, the family, all your connections. That's opportunity. And then processing your success that you gain from understanding this about yourself into reaching people. And that's through your pain. So just understanding that component of what you're good at, your skills, your talents, is just a small part of the whole. So just understand that this is a process. So the first step is to begin living that out now, and then start studying and analyzing and reflecting about the other circles, the passion, the opportunity, and your pain.
Okay, but her question was, so how do you practically live it out? So what would you say? So if it's relationship building, to me, that sounds like you would just take that skill in every area of your life. So it doesn't matter her current job, whether she does church, whatever it is just refining that skill within every area of her life.
Yes. So the way the Strength Finders is built, these are talents and skills that you do better than most others. So just understand that when you make decisions for what type of work you want to do, whether that's volunteering at the church, to the type of career or job that you take on, just understand that there's a part of you that's always going to drive towards connecting with people. And you're really good at that aspect, understanding relationship and connection. And so if you go, for example, here's a practical expression. If you take a job that isolates you and you're required to work independently, you talk to no one, and you just do a task, you're going to be miserable. And so what you need to do is start making decisions that are congruent with how your design is. And that practically looks like this. For example, for you being a relational-driven person, you like to build rapport. So spending the time to build rapport with someone is not a problem for you. It's a pleasure. And you shouldn't feel guilty about talking with people and connecting and serving people. That should feel natural. And so if you don't make those decisions to build relationship, then you're not going to be that fulfilled, to be honest. You need to do that. So I'm not sure about what stage of life that you're specifically at, but take the time to analyze those Strength Finders results and start incorporating them into your daily decisions. So if you have kids, for example, since I'm task-oriented, very opposite of you, I appreciate people like you. When it comes to my kids and how I deal with my wife's more relationally driven. And so she'll be kind of the soft end of like a lot of the standards that I'll employ. And she'll help me as a taskmaster, because I'm naturally designed that way, to soften the way that I approach my children. So that's a practical way to take somebody who's strong in strengths in specifically relationships to help somebody like me. So there are people in this world that need you, Becky, that need what you can bring to the table, and your job is to go find them and help them.
That's good. I was laughing at the part. I'm a relationship builder myself, and a couple years ago I was on a job and I had to work it by myself. Like 8 to 10 hours a day by myself, nobody there. It was hands-on. And like the first 2 days was really cool because I was able to think and I just listened to music. Man, by the third day, I was like getting depressed. Like I was like, I don't know if I can do this. I had to mentally talk myself through it. The next 2 days, I was in like severe depression. Like I was ready just to hit myself in the head with a hammer and just die to get it over with. And by like the last day, I remember driving home. I was like, God, I cannot do this. Like you're going to have to change this situation because I will die if I have to do this another day. I mean, dude, it was miserable. And
yeah,
it's so funny how that works.
It's like asking a fish to climb a tree, like,
yes,
and then judging the fish for not being able to do so well. You know, that's in Scripture. We're told to train up a child in the way that he should go, and when he's old, he won't depart. Really, that word is about bent. Training up a child in their bent, their design, their personality. It's understanding your children, right? And then not requiring them to do things that they're not designed to do, which is like for you, isolating you away from other people and connections. And for Becky, it'd be like the same thing. So
yes.
It's the God that we serve built us for reasons. Understanding what those reasons are is what leads us to fulfillment and happiness and effectiveness in this planet, serving others. And so it's like you would never take a hammer and put it on a table as a paperweight. You could, but that's not the right way to use a hammer. Hammer's meant to hit a nail, and it's best when it hits the nail. So use the hammer for what it's meant to do. Becky, you have a purpose on this planet. Go do what you're meant to do.
So real quick too, for those of you out there listening, Roar Nation, if you're in a job that you just feel like you're hitting your head constantly, now don't get me wrong, there's things in our job that we don't like. All of us have those little things. Not everything's great. But if you're constantly just feel like you're going uphill, and it's just like the example was for me when I was doing that and I was miserable, you're not in the right place and you need to find another job, because you will be miserable your entire life and it's just not worth doing. So if you're miserable, that's a key to know that you're in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Yes. Can I add something to that too?
Yeah, please.
That's a form of pain, right? And so what you should do as well on top of that is not just immediately jump ship.
Yes.
It's not necessarily the wisest decision, even though you're not meant to be there. The transitionary period, which is what I think Becky is also alluding to, you could totally jump ship, by the way. I'm a sailor. If I wanted to jump ship, I could jump ship. But my odds of survival are nil. So I'm not going to do that, right? It's not the wisest thing to exit the ship by jumping off of it. In the same way, even though if you know that you're not meant to be there, immediately leaving is not often the best thing. What the best thing requires is a time of transition, which is some planning and understanding where you are, where you need to be, being a responsible adult by paying your bills, taking care of the people who depend upon you in that transition, and facilitating and living out a plan. So the first thing is not just immediately leave, which is what most people do, is to sit in that pain again. If you listen to last week's episode, sit in the pain, understand it, and when you've concluded this is not where I'm meant to be, then craft a plan.
Okay. All right. So before we get off topic on just questions, why don't you hit one of the questions that you have, Rusty, that one of the listeners asked you?
Yeah. So I told in the last episode that I'm a military instructor, and one of my students, because I did the same thing that John did, which was ping my network and ask, hey, about to have this podcast, we're going to do a Q&A. What do you want to know about purpose? And one of my students, Brown, wrote, at what point is our purpose determined and by whom? He gave the example, was Ben Franklin's purpose that of a blacksmith, journalist, scientist, or statesman? Was Jackie Robinson's purpose that of a soldier or a baseball player? Was Martin Luther King's purpose that of an academic, preacher, or an activist? And so he goes further in his question to kind of explain it, but let me condense it down to this idea. Often we think purpose is what we do. And let me just tell you, Roar Nation, that you are not what you do. Your identity and the job, the career that you're currently employed in or want to be employed in are not the same. So who you are as a person, where your purpose is found, you're going to see evidence of it, or you should, in your career, in how you make money, or how you contribute to this world. But you're an independent person that's unique, and it's not a title, it's not a job. So I just want to dispel a myth here that most people, and it's common, most people believe that what we do is who we are, and that's not the same. So, John, you and I were talking about this before we actually started recording, about this idea that that it doesn't matter what season of life that you're in, that the way that it shows up or you see evidence of your purpose could be different in every season. And so when if you were to take Martin Luther King or Jackie Robinson or Ben Franklin and translate them to a different culture and to a different era of time, they would still be who they are, wired how they are. And so their purpose would be the same, but how it gets manifested in that culture at that time could look very different. So for you that are listening, just understand that it's not up to someone else to tell you what your purpose is, like a title or a job will tell you. And if you mix those two, you're going to be very unhappy. Because if you're tying your value to the type of work that you do, then in times when things outside of your control affect your ability to create good work, you're going to see yourself as not good. And that's not the way it works. So you'll be on this roller coaster ride where you're constantly judging your value to this world based upon how effective you are and how people feel about you. And that's not the way I want you to think about it.
That's good. Really powerful. Okay. So does that answer, or does that sum up that question, you feel like?
Yeah, there's one thing. So here's a good principle, like for your listeners. John, are you familiar with resonance?
I'm not.
Okay, so I'm like if you haven't figured it out, Roaring Nation, and John knows me a little bit, I'm a thinker in a lot of ways, and I like to bring in science because I feel like it's like good because of science.
Well, science is a God thing. I mean, if he created it, then it's good.
Yeah, I'm really big in pattern recognition, so facts and science are really important to me. But one of those things, in physics, there's this thing called resonance. And what you'll find is that I've realized that this idea of this physics-oriented principle, this law, how it translates into us as human beings. And resonance works like this. Have you ever seen like a cartoon like Bugs Bunny in the old days, or like a movie, or at least heard of the idea of the opera singer that sings that note and cracks the champagne glass on a shelf, 10, 20 feet away from her?
Yes.
Okay, so what is actually happening is that every single element in this world, including ourselves, our bodies, and a rock, a building, everything vibrates on a wave frequency naturally. And so if I were to tap a glass, it makes a note at a certain frequency. If I add water, because water changes that dynamic of the weight and everything, if I tap it again, it changes the note, right? But fundamentally, everything vibrates at a frequency. If that opera singer sings that frequency of that object, the object has no choice but to vibrate and to resonate. It oscillates, it moves back and forth, it amplifies that object to the point where if she sings strongly enough, the glass shatters, right? Human beings are the same way. When someone says something, and some of you out there who are listening right now to John's podcast and then me right now when I'm talking, there are certain words, phrases, ways that we're describing things, truths that we're presenting that hits you and it resonates with you. Our purposes are very similar. So if in my business, when I go through the discovery process, I'm not creating purposes for people. What I'm doing is I'm looking for patterns in their lives that are constantly cropping up. And when I bring those all together into statements and I say something to them, or if you're a coach, if you're a leader, if you're a pastor, preacher, teacher, public speaker, whatever you are in your world, when you say something to someone, you're speaking out sound, which is a frequency. And when someone hears that and it hits them down to their core, they're resonating with it, it's an indication, a potential indication that this is part of who I am. Because like the glass, it cannot choose what it resonates with because it's designed a certain way. You as human beings who are listening to this podcast and seeking your purpose, you'll encounter things in life that resonate. Ideas, concepts, objects, colors, certain things that tie to you and your design, and they give you indication of clues, as it were, like if you're Sherlock Holmes, of what your purpose might be. So go find out and experience life, what certain things bring you alive, what things sadden you, like peak emotional experiences, what makes you super angry, what makes you super sad, super happy, what makes you alive, what makes you feel dead inside. Those are all can be summed up with this idea of resonance. What do you resonate with?
Glad you brought that up, Rusty. Here in about 30 days, we are just finishing up our book right now. Just got done. We're about to put it in print, but that's what we did in my book. Is we gave people those things that you talked about, and then we give them a list to say, hey, let's write down 10 things. Because sometimes, and if you don't have to buy my book or Rusty's or anything, I mean, this is just practical knowledge. You can just make a list right now and just write down 5 to 10 things in those areas. And like you said, you're going to start to see patterns.
Yes. And, you want me to give a practical exercise that's going to...
Yeah, dude, let's do it.
Okay, so like with some of my students and with people that I coach, like here's a tool. Once again, all tools are meant to be used in its right context, but this tool is hugely valuable. I got it from a guy named Mike Mandel. He has a podcast, and I was listening to him describe some of this stuff about end values. And here's the thing: end values are things that are things that we care about deeply that that won't really change so much. But here's the problem. If we do something that is contrary to an end value, even if we don't know what our end values is, our subconscious does. And what happens is, for example, one of mine is freedom. Anytime someone tries to take away freedom from me, there's an immediate defensive response. The fight or flight response kicks in, and I have to slow it down and stop it and choose to do something different. But I notice that. It crops up and a defensive wall comes up. You're trying to take my time, my money, my resources, my choice, right? And so I get very defensive about that. One of my end values is freedom. Now, if I do anything, make a choice that is contrary to freedom, if it makes me a slave or reduces my freedom, what happens is I end up self-sabotaging. I end up stop being productive. I do things last minute, and I only do them half-assed because I just want to get it over with. I don't really actually care about it because down at my core, remember in the last episode, I said that we make emotional decisions and justify it logically afterwards?
Yes.
So your value system lies in your emotions. So here's the exercise for everybody if they find that valuable, this concept. What you need to do is figure out what your values are, specifically your end values. And values are different than virtues. There's no moral element. It's just how important is it to you? That could be family. That could be money and wealth. It could be time. It could be health. It could be a whole host. It can be anything you want, really. So let me teach you how to find your first end value. So what you need to do is write out a single word of something that is important to you. And let's just say it's learning. You love to learn. You're constantly reading, listening to podcasts, watching videos on YouTube. You get lost when somebody's teaching new things. You like to go and see lectures just for fun because you're weird like that. It's all good. Okay, but you love learning. What you need to do is then write learning down and then ask yourself this question. What does learning give me? And in this hypothetical scenario, maybe learning gives you knowledge. And so you write knowledge down. And then you think about it. Okay, I have knowledge. What does knowledge give me? Knowledge makes me informed. I want to be informed. Okay. What does being informed do for me? Well, and this is where it starts, like once you get a couple layers deep, you start to slow down in your thinking process. This is part of the part of sitting in it. What does being informed do for me? What does it give me? Well, maybe being informed allows me to make better choices. Wisdom. I can make wise choices, so I'll be wise. And then you write wisdom down. What does wisdom give me? You might sit there for about 30 seconds and find yourself, I don't know what it gives me. And you get frustrated and some people give up. But that's exactly the point. If it cannot give you something else, wisdom for you is an end value. And then you take that word and you put it in another column. And then you repeat the exercise. And what you want to do is have between 3 to 5 end values that are listed on another sheet. And you keep repeating this exercise until you get that. Then the second portion of this is then you're going to stack all 5. Let's say there are 3. Let's say it's wisdom, it's love, it's family. Okay. Then what you need to ask yourself is, if I could only have 2, which ones can I have? And so maybe wisdom is I want love and I want health. So I'll put wisdom at the bottom. So you move it to another category. Okay. So between health and love, what's more important to me? I need love. I could sacrifice health if I have love. So I move health over. And then you move love over as the last one. So now you have your top 3 to 5 end values in order of most importance. And from this point on, your job is now to look at your entire life. And if you've done the exercise right and spent the time and done the work, what you'll see is that every decision you've ever made in life has been congruent with this. Every good decision has helped you get those end values. Every bad decision you've made has been contrary to those end values.
Man, that's a great exercise, dude. I'm excited about that one. I'm gonna have to. I've actually never done that, so I'm really, really interested in nailing that one down. So,
yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Okay, so I'm gonna keep us on track, or I'm gonna try to, not guarantee. Okay, so you just answered your student's question. I got a question for you. Actually, my wife posted this one, so thank you so much, Casey, for doing that. She said, once you know your purpose, how do you use it to serve others without getting burned out?
Well, that's a great question. I will say this. It boils down to the same thing that every human being is beholden to, and that's limitations, right? And you mentioned a great book called Boundaries, right?
Yes.
So it's understanding what your boundaries are based on those end values and priorities in your life, right? So even knowing your purpose doesn't mean that you get to be free to do whatever you want, whenever you want. No, that's the way that a child thinks. But you're an adult. And so we make choices in life, hopefully intentionally. That's what we're teaching right now, making intentional choices based upon our values, our purpose, our priorities, and responsibilities. So to keep from being burnt out, here's what it usually boils down to be honest, is guilt. Most people have a hard time saying no because of the guilt. Oh, if I don't say yes, then this person won't like me, or I won't accomplish this thing. Or the reality is, you have only 24 hours a day. You only have so much energy. You only have so much resources. So the faster you can accept that reality, the easier it is to say no and to set those boundaries for yourself. For example, I could work till 2 a.m. every day and then get up at 6 to go to work on the business. I don't. I did it last year when I was writing the book with Brian and when we first started launching this thing, because we were in that season. Today, I'm not doing that. I'm setting a boundary because I don't want to burn out. And so, Casey, love your question. I think it really boils down to is believing that what you're contributing to the world doesn't have to be perfect every time.
Yeah, I want to hit on this too, is finding, part of the gifts that you have. So I can only hit this one because obviously my wife asked the question. One of her gifts, she's a giver. And I mean, she would give you, if she had $1 left to her name, she'd give you $1 and go borrow $1 to give you from somebody else. I mean, she gives, she's just the most amazing person when it comes to that. And again, boundaries is so important because if you don't set those boundaries, and it's one thing to give when you're supposed to, but we're not always called to give in certain areas. So you can give too much to the point where it hurts you and your family. And those are things that her and I had to learn at a very young age because I would make the money. I'm a giver, but not like she is. So like I'd go out and make money and then she'd give it all away to help people. Well, that's great. But the problem is it caused conflict because all of a sudden, well, we have not did we just give everything away? We have nothing for ourselves. And that was way early on in our marriage, years and years ago. And I mean, we've come a long way now, but it's setting those boundaries to say, okay, this is what I've allotted. And I'm just using this example for us, but we allot to say, this is what we have to give. After everything else is taken care of, this is allotted and we can give it wherever we need to, but that's all there is to give is this block. And it's important that with whatever gift, skill, whatever you have is only giving what you can give and no more.
Yes. And what you just did was, what was the difference? It was intentionality,
yes.
Right? And it's acknowledging the reality and then adding intentionality so that we don't sacrifice what we want to do, but here's how we can do it best. And what you have is, what's funny is the thing, people like most often will rebel against boundaries, right? Even self-imposed ones. But the reality is it's a form of discipline and you actually gain more freedom and depth in what you want to accomplish when you incorporate those boundaries
I would say
and discipline.
Rusty is even joy and peace because what happened was, is you give, okay, so we're going to just go back to this example, is you give so much because you want to give, but what happens is your gift ends up bringing you like, you're mad, you're angry, mostly resentment. And then what happens is it no longer becomes enjoyable. But that's the very thing that you're gifted to do. So once I allowed, and again, everybody wants to, not everybody, but like you said, you want to kick those doors open. You're like, I don't want boundaries. But what happens is those boundaries create a safe space. And it allows me to operate within that area. And when I do that, I have my joy, my peace, all those things, the fruits of the Spirit, I'm able to operate in those things because I'm not going outside my boundaries, and then I don't feel taken advantage of, and I'm still operating with what I'm given to operate in.
And the best way for your listeners to understand, like, how do I figure out if I'm overstepping or outside my boundaries? The best indication is the fruit. So what is coming out of it, and how do you actually test that? Is it disrupting, bringing chaos into my life, or is it bringing order and growth and benefits that are good? Like, is it disrupting or is it helping my life?
We know what I thought about as soon as you said that. It was fruits of the Spirit, Rusty. Mm-hmm. So joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, and self-control. Mm-hmm. And I think anytime you operate outside of any of those, and it's not bringing those things, we're not in our sweet spot.
Yep, absolutely.
So sorry to interrupt you, but I'm good at it. But I know we're going back and forth. Okay, so we hit Casey's question. Let's go to one of yours. Okay,
so Christopher Horsley asks, why is purpose important? Where does it come from? How do you know that such a thing even exists? Is there a difference between purpose and meaning? What about destiny? So there are a lot of questions in there, and those are very deep. So I'm going to tackle the first one, and which is, why is purpose important? I'm going to tell you that purpose is essential to everything that we do in life, both on the macro scale, like the big scale, like purpose of life, to just basic intentionality in every decision that you make. Children do things by accident and are left to the whims of whatever they feel in the moment, right? But adults do the hard thing. They say no, and they do things for bigger long-term reasons. So here's basically how I can sum it up and condense it. Why is purpose important? It's important because it teaches you how to live the long game. And that's what we do as adults. That's what separates us from adults and being children, is that as we mature, we start seeing the long-term vision of how our lives are going to play out. We start thinking on that scale. And as Christians, we're thinking about eternity. So, for example, C.S. Lewis wrote a book called Mere Christianity. It's a great book. Highly recommend it. He talks about, in that book, one concept of a ship that's sailing. And he says, if I only lived 80 years, a 1 degree difference wouldn't make much. And that 1 degree is represented by being a little bit more patient, a little bit more kind. And that 1 degree change on a daily basis doesn't really add to much in an 80-year lifespan. It does add up to something, but it won't shift the ship that much. But when you're talking about eternity, which is the mindset of a Christian, being a little bit more patient today, a little bit more kind, a little bit more loving, a little bit more generous today, that 1 degree difference translates over eternity. That's a huge change of direction. And so purpose, what it does is it gives you an indication of how you're supposed to live, which is that mentality of the 1 degree. Because in the short term, in an 80-year lifespan, you might not make that 1 degree difference. But if you're thinking the long game, eternity, then a 1 degree difference does matter. So it provides meaning. It provides context. It's a way of thinking. It's all about intentionally living your life congruent with your design, how you are, so that you can have the most maximum impact in the world serving others. So purpose is essential to living a happy, congruent, intentional life.
Amen to that, man. I love that. So, all right, Rusty, thank you so much for taking the time for doing this. There was just so much value in these last 2 episodes. Word Nation, I hope that helped you tremendously. I do recommend some of the books. We'll have links. You can find Rusty on past episodes. We'll have links to Entrepurpose, hiring him as a coach to help you stuff. I have my book releasing here soon on purpose. So there is a lot of content. I'm not recommending one over another because I've read dozens and they all serve a different purpose because they're going to hit it from different angles. So I recommend those. All right, Roar Nation, thank you so much for joining us. We love you. And remember, at the end of the day, be real, be authentic, and be you. God bless.
That's all for this episode of Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You. Be sure to go to areyoureal.org for your free questionnaire to identify your gifts and talents and how you can use them to help people become leaders and catapult them into their destiny to help others become the leaders of tomorrow. We appreciate you spending your time with us and look forward to helping you reach out and revolutionize next time on Are You Real? Finding the Authentic You.